Welcome to Pub Sports Radio and Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy for Thursday, November 19th. It is week 11 in the NFL, and we'll break down every single game on the NFL card from a betting perspective, as I do each and every week here on the show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in every Thursday live at 1 p.m. Eastern, or perhaps on replay or archived. If you happen to be one of those people that can't catch it live and you decide you make time to actually watch it on replay, I appreciate you guys as well for doing that. Last week was the week that, it was, let's put it this way. It was the streak buster last week for me in the NFL. It was not my finest week from a betting standpoint in the NFL. It was a losing week for me. Not a disastrous week, but definitely down a couple of units last week with the NFL results. So hoping for better things this week. The good news is if you tuned into the NFL show that we do on Sundays right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel, myself, Connor Mack, and Ski Profit, I did give you a best bet winner with Buffalo and Arizona over the total. The game of the week, maybe one of the games of the year in the NFL so far. Just an unbelievable football game. Thrilling, dramatic, tense, right down to the wire. And of course, one of the craziest, most insane finishes that you'll ever see, because you think Josh Allen, with that wonderful touchdown drive that he put together, and including a phenomenal throw to Stephon Diggs, the out route, threw the ball low, but he did it so that there was no way the defender could get to it. Only his receiver could, and Diggs lays out for a nice catch, which 34 seconds to go. You thought the Bills had that game wrapped up with that touchdown drive, which was a terrific drive for Josh Allen. But sure enough, Kyler Murray heroics prove otherwise. And just an incredible play on the Hail Murray, as I like to call it, to DeAndre Hopkins, because for that whole thing to happen, Kyler Murray has to scramble, and keep the play alive for the amount of time he did to allow the receivers to get downfield into the end zone, to avoid the immense pass rush that was coming after. And the Bills were bringing heat, but Kyler Murray and his quick feet, just got out of that pocket, bootleg to the left, and then he just chucked it as far as he could, hoping the ball would reach the end zone so that at least one of his receivers, could try to get under it. And sure enough, the receiver that did get under it for Arizona was the receiver you want to get under it in that situation if you're a Cardinals fan, and that was the only DeAndre Hopkins. I hope Bill O'Brien enjoyed that game, by the way. I hope you enjoyed that, Bill, sitting on your sofa, in the unemployment line. Hope you enjoyed watching what DeAndre Hopkins did at the end of that game against the Buffalo Bills last Sunday. But a thrilling win for Arizona. It was just an outstanding football game, and it's fitting that I'm talking about that game to open this show, because first game for week 11 involves the Arizona Cardinals tonight on Thursday Night Football. So with that in mind, let's get into the card. It's Arizona, Seattle tonight, Thursday Night Football. Really intriguing game. NFC West rivals, an important game as well in the standings and in the wide open race that is for first place in this division. I think it's pretty safe to count out the 49ers in this division, but the other three teams, Arizona, the LA Rams, Seattle, they're all very much alive for first place in this division, and it's going to be a fun, exciting battle in this last month of the season coming up to determine the winner of the NFC West. We've got Seattle down to a 3-point home favorite. It's important to point out with this game tonight that Seattle on the look-ahead line last week against Arizona in this game was -5.5. So you have seen a significant point spread adjustment in this game. 2.5 points has been made. Seattle now down to 3 in this game. The total is around 56.5, 57, depending on which book you're looking at right now. Early in the week, the money flooded in on the over. The total opened 55. It went up to as high as 58.5 early in the week, Monday or Tuesday, and then we had some buyback on the under, and now this total has settled in around 57. There's a lot to dissect and disseminate going into this game. Let's talk about Seattle first. This is a team that's clearly reeling a little bit right now. They've lost 2 in a row. That hasn't happened very often in the Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson era. 3 losses in a row has been even more infrequent and even more an extremely rare occurrence under the Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson coach quarterback era of this team, which has now been, almost a decade. Well, Carroll has been here for a decade, almost that long for Russell Wilson now with this team as well. So they're in rarefied air. This team just does not have extended losing streaks very often. So it's hard to truly buy in. Could this team really lose 3 in a row? A team that rarely ever has these kind of slumps? Maybe this is the time they could. And maybe this is now what Seattle is. They've been, I don't want to say exposed, but clearly this is a flawed team. They have been, let's call it for what it is. They've been porous on defense. They have been absolutely hideous in the secondary in particular. Actually, up front, you look at their rushing defensive numbers. They're not bad. They really aren't. I mean, I'm not saying this to be funny. Their numbers against the run defensively, Seattle, there's a lot of teams that have much worse numbers against the run. You look at Seattle this year, 95 rushing yards per game allowed, 3.7 yards per carry. Those are incredible numbers against the run. But here's why those numbers are skewed a little bit. I think they are better against the run up front with that defensive line, Seattle. I think if there's anything on this defense that resembles something decent, it's probably the front. It's definitely not the secondary. But I think those numbers are skewed in terms of why do they look so good with their run defense? Because nobody bothers to run the football consistently anymore against Seattle. Why would you? Why would you when you're just throwing the ball with ease, with incredible success week in and week out against this secondary, and they're still not stopping it? This has been multiple weeks now. We have seen Seattle's secondary give up, 300 plus passing yards to the opposing quarterback. It's happened so many times this year, and it continues to be a problem. I still remember the Bills and Josh Allen a couple weeks ago. They didn't bother to run the football because they didn't need to. It was just bing, bing, bing. Throwing the football down the field was consistently working, and Seattle wasn't stopping it. They got absolutely shredded through the air. Same thing happened last week. Sean McVay believes in a balanced offense for the LA Rams in that Seattle loss last week. He believes in running the football. He's usually a guy that'll commit to the run, and he'll use that run to set up the pass. He didn't do that on Sunday, which shows you just the lack of respect that people have for the Seahawks secondary right now. It's an absolutely atrocious unit. Jared Goff's throwing the ball way more than the Rams had running plays last week. They were a pass-heavy team. And Sean McVay pretty much did what other coaches have been doing lately. You just throw the football against this team. You're going to move the ball. You're going to have success. You're going to put up points. And that's exactly what the Rams were able to do. So for a team that usually is a lot more balanced than they were last week, even they realized, hey, this secondary can't stop anything right now. We're going to keep attacking it. We're going to keep looking to throw the football. And that's exactly what the Rams did. You got to believe Arizona is going to do the same here with Kyler Murray. And, that's the Rams offense with, the Rams passing game is all right. I certainly think the Arizona passing game is a lot more dynamic, a lot more explosive, a lot more vertical, dangerous down the field. I'm waiting for Jamal Adams to make that big impact on this Seattle defense. I don't know if he's 100% fit yet, to be honest with you. This is a guy that, is returning from a long absence. He just doesn't look like he's in the rhythm of this defensive scheme and this team yet. I think that's part of it. He hasn't played well, but I definitely think the lack of, consistent, being on the field week in and week out throughout this very unique season, I think that's probably hurt Jamal Adams and his development in this defense quite a bit. You would expect him to get better, but the question is, are you really going to get better now in a short week? You don't have a lot of practice time going from a Sunday to a Thursday. So it's a troublesome matchup here for Seattle's secondary. Here we go again. Worried that they might get torched in this game. Clearly, the betting markets think they're going to get torched because Arizona's taken all the money this week. Like I said, Seattle opened as a 5.5 point home favorite in this game. They're all the way down now to -3 right now at the current now, plus money actually. Plus 100, plus 105. I'm seeing it's less than even money now with Seattle laying a field goal here at home. And when you look at what Murray has to work with of course, DeAndre Hopkins, with Christian Kirk, with Larry Fitzgerald, who's still got something in the tank, even at his age, he can still, he's not got the speed he did, but he's got the hands and the ability to get open still. Andy Isabella. You've got just a ton of weapons to work with here for the Arizona Cardinals. And it's hard to believe this is going to be a matchup where Cliff Kingsbury is going to deviate from what Sean McVay did last week, from what Sean McDermott did the week before. Just throw the ball at will against this Seattle secondary, and you're going to move it. And you're going to move it with a great deal of success. So I know opposing quarterbacks of Seattle lately, you bet them over passing yards. That's been almost a slam dunk prop bet. And you got to believe that's something I'm very much interested in here tonight from a prop standpoint. And I will have some props posted on Twitter at Bobano for tonight's game. I like to have props for the standalone primetime games, Thursday night game, the Sunday night game, the Monday night game. I didn't love the props necessarily on the Monday night game last week, but I think, and nor the Sunday night game with the Ravens and the Patriots, but this one does stand out. I think there's some good opportunities. Remember, as someone who looks at overs when it comes to props, this should be a relatively high-scoring game, as evidenced by where the total is. I think there's going to be some good opportunities here, but no doubt, passing yards over for Kyler Murray is the first thing that stuck out to me. And you can get 283.5, at a few books with that. And considering, again, Seattle's been giving up 300 routinely through the air to the likes of Allen and Goff in the last couple of games. This has been a problem for this secondary, giving up big yardage, big plays through the air. Definitely, I could see Murray going over that 283.5 passing yards in this game tonight. So Seattle's probably going to have issues stopping Arizona. However, Arizona's got issues on defense right now too. You look at what the Cardinals have done the last few weeks on defense. They gave up a lot of points to Seattle in the overtime win. They escaped with the win, but they just outscored Seattle. It's not because their defense stopped Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. 2 weeks ago against Miami, Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins having a ton of success moving the football against this Arizona team in that victory over the Cardinals. And then again last week, they really won that game because Kyler Murray pulled off an incredible play at the end of the game. It wasn't because the defense stepped up. It wasn't because the defense made plays. Josh Allen and the Bills were going up and down the field most of last Sunday's game against this Arizona defense. And it's an Arizona defense that has lost key pieces in all three levels. Chandler Jones has been out for several weeks, and he's not coming back. That's, downgraded this pass rush significantly. I don't find they're putting the same amount of pressure on opposing quarterbacks without him. They've got concerns on the defensive line now with the injury last week to Corey Peters, rather. That is a huge deal. A torn patella tendon. He's going to miss the rest of the season. He's one of the key cogs right in the middle of that defensive front for Arizona. That's a significant blow to this defense. And they've also been battling cluster injuries for weeks in the secondary. And they might get Dre Kirkpatrick back for this game tonight, but he's been dealing with a hamstring injury. You're never quite sure if he's ready to just be lockstep with opposing receivers when you're coming off an injury, anything to the ankle, the lower leg, or the hamstring. You always have to be concerned when you're a cornerback, when you're coming back from an injury like that. Are you going to be absolutely ready, to be playing at your best in a tough position, especially in today's era of football, 2020? You know how difficult it is being a cornerback with the rules skewed to the offenses, and it's difficult, more difficult than it's ever been before to defend at a high level. So you worry about whether Dre Kirkpatrick, if he does play tonight, how effective is he going to be? We know Robert Alford was a huge loss in the secondary earlier this season. Kevin Peterson in that secondary is out still with a concussion. So there's still some key concerns with Arizona in terms of a shorthanded secondary going into this game. Budda Baker is going to play, but he's had a groin and an ankle injury that he's been hampered by the last week or so. You saw it against Buffalo. Budda Baker had a very, very quiet game, and he usually has a game, usually every game with an elite safety like that, he's going to make at least one play that stands out. I didn't see anything in that regard from him on Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. So it's a situation where there's definitely some issues with Arizona. Pass rush-wise, in the secondary, it's still shorthanded, and Seattle was able to pick it apart before. It's probably a big reason why these secondary injuries for Arizona, they really started to accumulate the last few weeks. And it's no coincidence in my mind that Arizona, 3 straight games, 3 straight overs. when those injuries really started to mount. And all three of those games got into the 60s. Look, it's a high total. It's, there's been an adjustment made. 57s you don't see all the time in the NFL. But I keep coming back to the same final score in my mind in this game, and that's 31-28 for somebody. Hopefully Seattle, because I have bet Seattle on the money line here, not -3. I've decided to pay the juice, pay the piper a little bit, and go with Seattle around -146 on the money line is what I got at Pinnacle. It's around -145, -150 in that range at most books. I could see them winning by exactly 3. Normally, I wouldn't lay that big of a price on the money line, but this does feel like a close game, a down-to-the-wire game. It's kind of what we get with these two teams now on a weekly basis. I just think it sets up far too good for Seattle here. They're at home. They played their best football at home. Remember, their last home game was against San Francisco, and they basically ran away and hid from the 49ers in the second half of that game. It's Arizona going on the road with a short week following that big win against Seattle. Seattle looking to avoid a second straight loss this season to the Arizona Cardinals, and their third straight loss overall, which hasn't happened. And even after the loss to the Rams last week, I liked Seattle in that game. And the last thing I want to do after really liking Seattle last week against the Rams and losing is go with Arizona here and then watch Seattle win this game. That nothing frustrates me more than that, where I bet a team and lose the week before, I fade them the next week, and then they bite me again. I don't like that. So I'm sticking with Seattle. I just think that from a situational perspective, this sets up well. It's again, the value now is definitely toward the Seahawks, considering they were -5.5 at the open. They're now -3, and you can get that money line price around that -150 range. So I have small plays only on this one. They're not best bets, but Seattle money line as well as over 57 in this game. 3 straight overs for Arizona, 60s. All 3 of those games getting into at least the 60s in terms of total points scored. I think that's what we've got tonight in this game. Home favorite and over for me. Thursday night football. And I also like the Kyler Murray passing yards over quite a bit. In fact, I actually like both quarterbacks over their rushing yards as well. This is a game where I think with a lot on the line, Kyler Murray is not scared to run with it. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last week against the Bills. And with Russell Wilson the last couple of weeks struggling with turnovers and interceptions and too many giveaways, which is very unlike Russell Wilson when he's on top of his game. And knowing that Seattle is, trying to avoid a third straight loss, I think he does whatever is necessary to move the chains, to keep the offense on the field, to keep drives going, and that includes running the football when required. So I think you're going to see a more aggressive Russell Wilson tonight when it comes to running with the football. So Kyler Murray is 54.5 rushing yards to the over. And Russell Wilson is 32.5 rushing yards. I would like both. I think both quarterbacks tonight are going to be active as runners with the football. And I think those are 2 props that are worth looking at here as well between the Cardinals and Seahawks tonight. All right, let's go now to Sunday and the Week 11 card. Philadelphia, Cleveland. Cleveland 3-point favorites. There are still some 3.5s out there, but a lot of the books now down to 3 on Cleveland. Total 47.5 in this game. Cleveland with the win last week against Houston, 10-7. One of those games that's very, very difficult to – you can't upgrade Cleveland from that performance. They didn't play great, but it's hard to downgrade Cleveland from that performance just because of what the conditions were last week in Cleveland. You were dealing with crosswinds. You were dealing with a difficult time for offenses to throw the football. That was, I think, a big part of the issues going into that game last week between the Browns and the Eagles, or Browns and the Texans, rather. So they did what they had to do. Of course, that was the Nick Chubb game where he is stepping out at the 1-yard line to cost Cleveland backers. And Cleveland was a smaller bet for me, but I was still ticked off at the moment it happened when he stepped out at the 1-yard line. And, of course, Cleveland takes the knee. They win by 3 Don't cover as 4-point home favorites. And I use the Score app a ton, which is one of my favorite apps on my phone for live scoring, odds. It's really good for sports bettors, the Score app, because they give you the point spread and the total with every game in terms of the scoreboards that they post. And all the games, doesn't matter the sport, basketball, baseball, hockey, football, when you click on or when you tap on a player or click on a player and their stats come up, they also have a little avatar or display picture of that player. So obviously you click on Nick Chubb, you see his picture with him smiling. It's the display picture that they have on the Score app for every player. And I had my little, immature, what a stupid thing to do moment where I'm like basically punching at Nick Chubb's avatar display picture on the Score app. I don't break my phone, thankfully. I did it lightly. It wasn't like it was vicious or anything. I'm like, you motherfucker, you didn't get into the end zone there. It was just one of those little moments I wasn't very proud of, to be honest with you. I'm in my mid-30s now. It's time to get rid of some of those in the heat of the moment, immature moments. And unfortunately, I suffered one at the end of that Houston-Cleveland game on Sunday. All that being said, when, at the moment it happened, you're frustrated, and then you think about it a couple minutes later, I'm like, you did the right thing. He doesn't want to give Houston the ball back. What if they score? What if they get the onside kick? And all of a sudden you're sweating and you may risk disaster. So, you end the game with the ball in your hands. There's no way Houston's getting it back, and you can run out the clock. So, it sucks for Cleveland bettors, but, from a team perspective, it was probably a smart call. That's the call that Todd Gurley should have made a few weeks ago with the Atlanta Falcons against Detroit, but he didn't. So as frustrating as it was in terms of the Cleveland team, he made the right move. Philadelphia, well, there's going to be a lot of people concerned about Philadelphia because you got so many of your offensive pieces back last week against the New York Giants, and you still had a real tough time getting anything going. Carson Wentz still struggled. His accuracy, his completion rate wasn't great. Yet the offensive line was as healthy as it's been all year. You got Miles Sanders back at running back. Alshon Jeffrey came back at receiver. That was supposed to be a game where Philadelphia's offense was supposed to come together. However, even with all those guys coming back, you're a minimal amount of practice time to get cohesion in there and belief and just get everybody on the same page. Now you're going to have a full week this week to get everybody here on the same page on the offensive side of the football, which I think is going to be something that helps this Eagles team a little bit. And we know sometimes with Philadelphia, when they play teams that are better record-wise than them, sometimes you get some of their better performances, yet it's the teams that they should beat that they often have trouble with and they struggle with. And you've seen that. You certainly saw that in the Baltimore and the Pittsburgh game earlier this year. They lost to Pittsburgh, but really battled the Steelers down to the wire. And the same thing with the Baltimore Ravens. Two of the better performances this year for Philadelphia were against better teams going into this game. I'm trying to make a case for Philly here, as even though I know everybody is being rough on them right now. They're in the terrible NFC East division. They're only 3-5-1 on the season. But, Cleveland, to me, the key for them is running the football to have success offensively. You don't want Baker Mayfield to have to carry the load. He's capable of doing it if you get the good Baker Mayfield. But then there's some games where he's just not sharp at all. He's making those bad decisions and turning the football over. And it's really going to come down to which one is it here for the Cleveland Browns. The good news for the Eagles is their run defense hasn't been bad this year. It's not bad. And their defensive front's not serviceable. They've given up 4.4 yards per carry this year. They've given up 133 yards per game on the ground. That should allow them a chance to have some success here. Doug Peterson sort of has had a angry, cantankerous week, especially on his weekly radio appearance in Philly. A lot of you have heard that on Twitter, him just frustrated with what this team has gone through in recent games. But you start to look at Cleveland here, the last few games, lost big 38-7 against Pittsburgh, barely beat Cincinnati 37-34, lose to Las Vegas 16-6, barely beat Houston 10-7. The last four games for Cleveland, they're barely winning games, and they're barely winning games against the Cincinnatis and the Houstons of the world, far below 500 teams. And this is not exactly a team thriving right now at a level where Can you lay 3.5 with them against a team that obviously it's a huge game for the Eagles? Every game is now in terms of their standing in the division. I truly believe the Eagles have a chance in this game, and I think you're going to get a much better effort. People are calling this team soft. People are jumping off the Eagles bandwagon after the dismal game against the Giants last week. I think this is one of those good classic NFL situations. Everybody just down on the Eagles right now and very, very negative toward them. Watch them rise up and give Cleveland a game, maybe even get the win here. So I'm definitely leaning Eagles here. I do want to see what the weather's going to be closer to kickoff, because they are talking about some wind and some rain potentially in the forecast, which is why I'm a little bit surprised this total's gone up a little bit. But right now I'm leaning Philadelphia in that game on Sunday. NFC South battle, Atlanta, New Orleans, next game on tap. We've got the Saints 4.5 to 5-point home favorites at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, 50.5 the total. Yeah, around 50.5 the total in this game. And obviously big reaction to Drew Brees' injury, no question. That's definitely a big part of the reasoning for this line move toward the Atlanta Falcons in this game. And look, let's give Atlanta credit. The Falcons have the receiving core intact. Julio Jones missed time earlier this year, and I don't think they won a game when he was out of the lineup. And with him back, they've been better. They've had their entire receiving core in place. Matt Ryan's been better, with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, and the whole receiving core on tap. And they're playing really hard under Raheem Morris. And we've seen a pattern now of the Atlanta Falcons where the season gets away from them. And then when things have already gone south, then they start putting it together. Then they start playing some of their best football. Saw it again last year where they got off to that dismal start, but then turned it around. There's definitely things to like. No question about what we're seeing from the Atlanta Falcons right now. I understand that completely. This is a team that is finding a way right now to be able to play pretty solid football. And with Drew Brees out indefinitely, Atlanta rolling now, playing better football, more competitive football. Think about the fact, too, that Atlanta would be 4-0 straight up and ATS, if Todd Gurley probably doesn't make that blunder that he made against the Detroit Lions. So, there's definitely positives for this Atlanta Falcons team since the coaching change after Dan Quinn was relieved of his duties. They beat Minnesota. They lose by 1 to Detroit. They beat Carolina. They beat Denver. However, let's pump the brakes a little bit on some of those wins. Minnesota, they beat Minnesota before Minnesota's bye. That's significant because Minnesota their pre-bye week for the Vikings and post-bye week, they're two different teams. And you've got to categorize the Minnesota team as two different teams, essentially. They couldn't get out of their own way, Minnesota, before their bye week. That's when Atlanta beat Minnesota. It's after the bye week that Minnesota's turned their season around and have now won 3 in a row. So it's a nice win, but they played Minnesota at the right time when Minnesota was just reeling and struggling to play good football. The Detroit loss, that's a bad loss, 23-22. They bounced back. They beat Carolina on the road, 25-17. They played Carolina when Carolina's season started to go south, and they started to really struggle quite a bit. And they played Carolina just days after Carolina left it all out on the field, just that past Sunday against New Orleans in a game that went down to the wire, and they led at parts of that game, but the Saints came back to win. So you put an asterisk beside that Atlanta win as well, in my opinion. And then the other one was Denver before their bye week a couple weeks ago. A Denver team that had nobody in the secondary, a terrible defense. Drew Lock has no confidence, and they had to hang on. They almost blew that game. They lost 34-27 against a Denver team that's just been miserable. So, yes, to an extent, Atlanta's been pretty good, better since the coaching change with Raheem Morris as the interim coach. But they have not played anybody, and I mean anybody, or beaten anybody at the caliber of the New Orleans Saints during this little hot streak that the Atlanta Falcons have had. I think that's a pretty safe thing to assume. Now, the reason why Atlanta's taking money is people are seeing they're off a bye. That's a bet on spot. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. Probably should have won all 4 of those games. The red hot team getting points. Drew Brees out. Got to bet Atlanta here, right? Not with my money. Not with my money. Not now at -4.5, -5. The question that I continuously ask myself here is, what do you think of Jameis Winston versus Drew Brees? What's the difference? Do you think there will be a difference? Do you think this New Orleans offense will just absolutely suck ass with Jameis Winston at the quarterback position instead of Drew Brees? Obviously, we know what the risks are. We know what the cons are of the pros and cons, Brees and Winston. The cons are he's a mistake waiting to happen at times, Winston. Decision-making is porous on the best of times. Turnovers are an issue. Forcing footballs are an issue. We know that. And obviously, it's going to put the defense in a tough spot if he goes back to the same old Jameis Winston mistakes that plagued him throughout his entire run as the starting quarterback of the Tampa Bay Bucs, which eventually led to the Bucs parting ways with Winston and bringing in Tom Brady in the offseason. But there are some pros to Winston and what he can give this offense that even Drew Brees can't, for as great a career as Drew Brees has had. Drew Brees this year can't throw a 60, 70-yard pass like he once did. He's keeping everything. Like, I think the largest pass player this year we've seen out of Brees is like 50. Or a little bit more than that. We just haven't seen him be that big deep ball threat. Winston's got that arm. He's got that ability to attack vertically, stretch the defense, and really put pressure on the secondary. And last I checked, this Atlanta secondary is still not that great. They have had trouble against the passing game throughout the course of the season. Jameis Winston's got the arm strength to attack that secondary. And I think have quite a bit of success against it. I think he's going to have a good game here. I know Atlanta has gotten better here in the secondary. They've gotten healthier for sure the last few weeks. And when you look at who they've played the last few games, they're going to be tested here as much, if not more, than any recent game. This Atlanta Falcons secondary. I don't think it's a stretch to assume that Jameis Winston can come in here and be solid, for this New Orleans Saints team. And when you talk about the defense for the Saints, they're finally as healthy as they've been all year, up front, linebacker, and in the secondary. The last few games, they've gotten much healthier, and we've seen the results of this Saints defense. 3 points against Tampa Bay, just absolutely devouring Tom Brady in that offense. And then 13 points last week against San Francisco. I think San Francisco caught New Orleans sleepwalking a little bit early in that game, and they were able to have some offensive success. But after that, the Saints turned up the screws on defense, and they basically completely smothered San Francisco for the rest of the game. This defense is playing at its highest level they have all season. I'm going to go against this move here and lay the points with New Orleans. They're playing good football. They smashed Tampa Bay. They won by double digits last week at home against San Francisco. Atlanta's been on a nice little run here. Give them credit for it. But now you're taking a step up in class. You're not playing Detroit. You're not playing Denver. You're not playing Minnesota when Minnesota was awful, which is when Atlanta played them. And you're not playing Carolina when Carolina's on a free fall right now. This is a step up in class. I don't think they're going to handle it that well. And you're just asking the Saints to win by a touchdown? Like 7-point win for New Orleans gets you the money here. And I know New Orleans has been a bad home favorite for the most part this season, but they finally covered his home chalk of 9.5 last week against San Francisco. And this is a discount to me. This is Atlanta with their record being what it is. 3-6 against 7-2 New Orleans at home in New Orleans. And the number's 4.5 in some spots and 5 in others. To me, that's a discount. To me, that's a bargain. I'm going to lay it here with the New Orleans Saints. Next up, we've got Detroit, Carolina. Two teams struggling right now. We've got Carolina -3 at home, 47.5 the total. But again, this line is not available in all spots. I have this really, really tough game. I mean, I bet against Detroit last week. One of the good bets I made last week was fading Detroit, laying more than a field goal against the Washington football team. It was a bad first half for Washington in that game, but the Lions did what they've done many times before, blow a big lead. It happened again last week against Washington. They did manage to survive blowing the lead, letting Washington tie it as they got into field goal range, and Matt Prater drilling, I believe, a 59-yard field goal to win that game. Very long-range field goal for Detroit to survive and hang on for the victory, but it's just still not a Detroit team I love. Their pass rush has been non-existent. Alex Smith had all day to throw the football last week in that game. The offense was good. I mean, Matt Stafford, you give him credit. The offense played a really solid game, impressive considering, down one of his key and one of his best offensive weapons in Kenny Golladay. This is just a really, really tough game to bet right now with the concerns about obviously Teddy Bridgewater's health going into this game, which is the main area of significance. I'm not sure I would want to back the Carolina Panthers in this game with a Will Grier sighting at quarterback for this team. I'm not sure I'd be all that interested or enthusiastic about betting Carolina. I think there would be a significant drop-off if Teddy Bridgewater were not able to play in this game for the Panthers. So that's definitely an injury you want to keep an eye on. Until then, I've got no opinion on this game until I know who's at quarterback for Carolina. New England and Houston, we've got New England. This has been a big line move toward New England. Houston was 2.5-point home favorites, and now New England 1.5 to 2-point road favorites here in Houston. The total 49 in this game. Look, if people want to just go nuts here betting New England after beating Baltimore, which, they beat Baltimore. That's 2 wins in a row now for the Patriots against the Jets and the Ravens win. You beat Baltimore. Yeah, look at this team's maybe starting to turn it around. You've got to keep last week's win in proper context. That game was played in a tsunami, essentially. That game was played in torrential downpour rains throughout the game. I don't know if you can fairly evaluate. And it's just like what I said about the Cleveland-Houston game earlier. How can you significantly elevate the Browns after that win or significantly downgrade the Texans after that loss based on the weather conditions, which were brutal for playing football? Same thing with Baltimore, New England. Give New England credit. I mean, it was a solid performance, no question. But they took advantage of some mistakes for Baltimore. The weather conditions were just absolutely atrocious for football with wind and heavy rains throughout that game. I don't want to go bonkers here saying, wow, New England, what a win. This team's back. No, I don't want to. And I'm not betting New England here. But I don't know if I don't know if I trust Houston either. It's just, to me, the line move's getting a little bit carried away. I still think Deshaun Watson's the far better quarterback right now at this stage of both of these guys' careers, Newton and Watson. The problem for Houston is their defense is just continuously poor, particularly against the run. And if the Patriots are able to run the football here, it probably sets up as a good matchup for them. But, New England off that kind of win Sunday against Baltimore, now the road favorites, and road favorite is not the role that I love this Patriots team in. I don't think I trust Houston either. So it's not a game I'm probably going to have a strong opinion on from a betting perspective. It's likely going to be a pass for me when it's all said and done. And New England, I know people are saying, hey, they're not giving up. They feel like they could make something of this season. I think it's a stretch a little bit to assume that. This team still has a long way to go in terms of trying to turn around any semblance of this season. But to me, them now being road favorites, no thanks. I think there's better things to look at, better sides, certainly, this Sunday in the NFL than now laying points on the road with this New England Patriots team. And I think, again, recency bias is certainly coming into play to at least a certain extent here in this game, seeing how the New England Patriots were able to beat Baltimore. But again, bad weather conditions. Let's not forget, Baltimore is just another one bites the dust a la Queen. That's going to become the theme song for the Baltimore Ravens right now. They are losing one key cog to injury after another on both sides of the ball. Multiple offensive linemen, key players on defense. They already lost their left tackle, Ronnie Stanley, a few weeks ago. So the injury bug is really starting to get after this Baltimore team, including in that Sunday night game last week against the Patriots. So again, very nice win, no question. Good win against a good team. But there were some extenuating circumstances surrounding that win that to me, don't make that New England win look all that it's cracked up to be. So, to me, it's one of those, there's better games to bet for me. I don't want to lay it on the road with New England, but do I really, really trust Houston, especially on defense? No. So to me, it is a clear pass. Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. Pittsburgh, 10.5 point road favorites. The total 46.5 in this game. Oddly enough, when it comes to Steelers versus Jaguars, Steelers have had their hands full with this Jacksonville Jaguars team. I mean, you look at series history, the last few years anyway. Jacksonville beat them 30-9 in 2017. Jacksonville beat Pittsburgh 45-42 in the playoffs a couple of years ago. You'll remember that when Jacksonville went to the AFC Championship game that year. And then in the regular season the following year, Pittsburgh with the 20-16 victory against Jacksonville. So oddly enough, this has been an opponent that has given the Steelers fits in recent years. And I'm leaning Jacksonville here. I'll say that right now here with the Jaguars as double-digit home dogs in this game. Pittsburgh is clearly a little bit overvalued right now. We know they're 9-0 straight. They've managed to be 7-2 against the spread, so you got to give them credit for that. But now they're on the road, just like they were a couple weeks ago against Dallas, coming off a division win. Remember, they beat Baltimore, huge win. They went on the road against Dallas, and for over a half of that game, it was a Steelers sleepwalk, go through the motions type of performance. They truly didn't wake up in that game until later. And of course, ended up barely winning that game against the Cowboys. Garrett Gilbert, who was the starting quarterback in that game for Dallas, he was driving Dallas to maybe tie the game late, and the Steelers had to get a fourth down stop in the last few seconds with Dallas, I think, just outside the 20-yard line, to hang on for that win. I think we might see that Pittsburgh again here going into this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That does concern me. And let's not forget, Baltimore, Thanksgiving, next Thursday, rematch against the Ravens. So this is not the spot I'm looking to lay doubles with Pittsburgh. And say what you will about Jacksonville, since Doug Marrone made the decision to stick Jake Luton, the rookie from Oregon State, at quarterback, but he's been serviceable. He's made some mistakes. He's not a finished, polished product at quarterback. Is he future number one starting quarterback material for Jacksonville? I don't think we truly know that yet. We don't, maybe not. But Jacksonville, in the two games that he's played and coming out of their bye week, for a team that had won just a single game, coming out of their bye week prior to facing Houston, and then, of course, they played Green Bay last week. And again, right in that game, they lose by 4. They lose by 2 to Houston. Competitive, down-to-the-wire games, 2-0 ATS under Jake Luton coming out of the bye week for this Jacksonville team. They've competed. They haven't rolled over. I was wondering, what were we going to get from Jacksonville with a team that was 1-6 after their bye? What were you going to get from this team? Were they going to roll over? Were they going to play dead? Were they going to just mail it in? They haven't done that, Jacksonville. And to me, this is a Jacksonville or pass game for me. Their defense at times last week against Aaron Rodgers was not bad. They held them to a couple of field goals. To hold Green Bay to 24 points at Lambeau Field, that's a respectable, at least, defensive performance from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I just think this sets up much like the Dallas game a few weeks ago did for Pittsburgh, where you had the big division win and you're a little bit lackadaisical in the next game like they were against Dallas, and you just do enough to win. And then Pittsburgh, of course, coming off another big division win against Cincinnati, romping the Bengals. Look, if Ben Roethlisberger plays as well as he did last week against Cincinnati, he was just outstanding, torching the Bengals secondary. And it's not like Jacksonville's pass defense is anything to write home about. If he plays that well again for the Steelers Sunday, Jacksonville's in trouble. But I just think from a spot perspective, after just dominating the Bengals, and now you're going outside the division, you're playing Jacksonville, you've got Baltimore on tap next Saturday. I'm at least mildly interested in Jacksonville. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but it is on the considerations list for my Sunday NFL card, without a doubt. This Jaguars side getting 10.5. I think this could be a lot like Dallas, one possession game, maybe a Pittsburgh win by 7, Pittsburgh win by 10 couldn't get you inside the number because there are some 10.5 still out there. And Jacksonville has competed. They have not rolled over. They have not waved the white flag. This team has completely been able to give it a good, honest effort, even with the dismal one-win season that they've had so far. And if they can give you something similar here Sunday, it might be enough, in my opinion, to stay inside the number here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, next game on tap as we continue to go through this NFL card. Green Bay Packers, Indianapolis Colts. This is one of the better games on Sunday. We've got Indianapolis around a 2-point home favorite here in this game against the Packers. The total right now currently around the low 50s, around 51, pretty much across the board. This looked like it was going to hit 3 because Indianapolis was around 2.5, and it was looking like it might hit -3 on the Colts side, but we have seen a little bit of Green Bay money come in here in this game. It's really interesting here because you've got the Colts offense, which with Phillip Rivers, I don't necessarily trust them. I mean, he played well against Tennessee, and I didn't expect that last Thursday, but Tennessee's defense has been a massive, massive problem area throughout the course of the season. I think you have to remember that in terms of Phillip Rivers being able to win that game last week. Green Bay, to me, on offense, to me, is going to really test this Colts defense. Colts defense that's really good. Don't get me wrong, but I'm definitely interested in Green Bay here, +1.5. There are a couple of injury concerns that we've got with the Packers coming into this game a little bit. But to me, in this situation, the Colts, it's still a wait-and-see kind of game for me here. I mean, the betting markets love Indy. They bet Indy like crazy against Tennessee. It worked out well for them here. And now they're taking a ton of money here in this game. Green Bay, again, with the game against Jacksonville last week, it'll look ugly as all get out that they only won by 4 points in that game, but they did hold a significant yardage advantage in that game. And Indianapolis' schedule, for the most part this season, still hasn't been anything to write home about necessarily. I just think for Green Bay, this is going to be a situation where the Colts defense, you look at all of the teams they've played so far, and this is going to be one of the top offenses, top quarterbacks they've played all season long. You look at the fact that Green Bay, definitely their offensive line starting to get healthier. Bakhtiari came back in the last game for the Packers, which is definitely going to help them in terms of their pass rush, not only in this game, but moving forward. To me, it would be Green Bay at the underdog price here. I'm still very, very skeptical of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, there are some things working in Indianapolis's favor going into this game. They have the extra time. They played Thursday night against Tennessee. That's significant, especially when you have a good coach like Frank Reich to get the team ready to go. And I think it's going to be a run-heavy approach here from the Colts. It should be for any team that plays Green Bay. They still have a tough time stopping the run. But I don't know if I love these Colts running backs necessarily. I mean, they're serviceable, Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines. But to me, neither one are as great as Marlon Mack, who, of course, is injured. Jonathan Taylor finally had a better game last week for the Colts as well against the Titans. But Jonathan Taylor's also had fumble issues. And that always stands out in the back of my mind, because if you're going to fumble the football as a running back and give Green Bay good field position on offense, that is going to be an issue, because Aaron Rodgers is going to turn those mistakes into points. I would expect Green Bay to be a bet for me. I would expect this Green Bay side to be on the card for me on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts defense is good. I don't think they're as good as their numbers show because of just the weaker slate of offenses they've played. Let's not forget the 2 losses for the Colts were Lamar Jackson, Baltimore, Baker Mayfield, Cleveland. Yeah, I'll take Green Bay's offense even better in terms and more explosive, especially through the air. I still think the secondary for Indianapolis can get picked on, and that is the exact area that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Robert Tonyan and Valdez Scantling, who is now starting to get things going a little bit for the Packers and be that number 2 wide receiver, stepping up, making plays that Aaron Rodgers needs to really test that Colts secondary unlike they've been tested at any point this season. So I'm definitely looking at the Green Bay side in that game. Next up, Cincinnati, Washington. Washington 1.5, 2-point home favorites here, 46.5 the total in this game. I'm just going to get a drink of water here because I can hear my voice is getting a little raspy. All right, there we go. I see a shootout here. I'm scaling back on totals this week, especially overs, because there's a lot of games with weather concerns going into Sunday. This one, the weather doesn't look like it's going to be terrible in Washington as of right now. And the total is reasonable here, 46.5 right now with this Bengals-Washington football team total. Washington, look, Alex Smith has been really good the last couple of weeks against the Giants and Detroit. Now, he made mistakes. He had a couple of turnovers in there as well. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination for Alex Smith in either game, but I like how he's been able to throw the football. Find Terry McLaurin down the field. Find Logan Thomas, his tight end. He's made plays, and he's getting, I think, more and more comfortable, more and more confident each week. And let's not sugarcoat it. I mean, he absolutely slayed the Lions defense team last week against Detroit. I mean, went up and down the field essentially against the Detroit Lions defense. And we saw the Cincinnati defense and that secondary last week. It was just torched. Torched is too kind of a word, to be honest with you, to describe Cincinnati's secondary against Ben Roethlisberger and company. They were outmanned. They couldn't offer up any sort of resistance with their pass defense. And I think they're going to have some trouble here with Washington, especially with Alex Smith airing the ball out quite a bit in recent games since he's taken over as the starter for an injured Kyle Allen. I think you're going to see Washington attack this secondary and attack it with success. The Bengals just continue to have problems against the passing game, and I think that's definitely going to be something that continues here in this game. You look at Alex Smith last week, 390 yards and back-to-back 300-yard passing games for him with this Washington offense. So he's played well. You know, the Washington defense, it's time to start talking, because that was, especially up front, the defensive line. I've said on multiple occasions throughout the course of the season that Washington's defense is a work in progress, but I like the defensive line quite a bit. I think that's the one area of strength that this team has, particularly on the defensive side of the football. But that defensive line has not played well the last few games. The New York Giants, like Daniel Jones, wasn't under much pressure a couple weeks ago when he faced Washington. The pass rush was non-existent for a large part of last week's game against Matthew Stafford as well, and the Detroit Lions. You know, it's so the defensive line that we've basically been hyping up and talking about in such a positive fashion this season, I don't think they played so good the last couple of games. And the secondary is not good for Washington. Not good at all. So you've got a quarterback now that you're facing here in Joe Burrow, who's got mobility, who can escape the pocket. He can make plays on his feet, and he's not. And if you don't get that pass rush, and I've seen a big decline in the ability to get to the opposing quarterback last couple of weeks, move the ball as well in this game, up and down with that offense, with Joe Burrow. You know, mob offense. Want to believe in a good performance out of them and Joe Burrow after a game like that. And Joe Burrow said it, you know, you're never going to see me play that bad probably ever again. He was really hard on himself for the performance against Pittsburgh last week. I think he bounces back here, plays a lot better. There are weapons here for Cincinnati. When you look at, you know, Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green, especially T. Higgins, receiver out of Clemson, who just seems to be getting more and more chemistry by the week with Cincinnati's going to move that ball in this game. I think Washington will have success moving the ball in this game. I have no opinion on the side. It could probably go either way. One thing about the Bengals and Washington, they both have losing records, but they both have tried. They've given you an effort, you know, in most of their games this season. So I'm staying off the side, but I think we get points in this game. And again, a reasonable total here, 46.5. 28-21 is an over. 28-24 is an over. You know, you get both of these teams to 24 points. and this game can get you up and over the total. I think that's exactly what we see here with Cincinnati and Washington. I like over 46.5. Tennessee and Baltimore. Interesting game here with Baltimore 5-point home favorites, 49.5 the total. It's a fascinating game to handicap because you got two teams kind of going in the wrong direction right now, especially Tennessee. It's really starting to fall apart for them a little bit the last few games. It really started with their first loss of the season against Pittsburgh. It's really where the downfall, I guess you could say, started for the Titans, and it's continued since then. They've now gone 1-3 straight up in ATS their last 4 games. They lose to Pittsburgh. They lose to Cincinnati. They barely beat Chicago 24-17, and then they get really dominated in the second half 34-17. And if you saw that Colts-Titans Thursday night game, and I'm sure most of you did, it was everything that wasn't working properly that night for the Titans. Their defense was scorched by Rivers in the offense for the Colts. Even Ryan Tannehill in the offense, which has been so good most of the season, I didn't like their performance. They didn't really get things going, especially in the second half. They were completely shut down by the Colts, and multiple special teams issues. Blocked punt, return for a touchdown, missed field goals. Steven Gostkowski, continues to have problems consistently making field goals for this team. So they've got all of a sudden a lot of issues right now. This Tennessee team that they've got to iron out. I don't know if I trust them right now. I really don't. They're getting 6. The flip side of that is I'm not in any sort of rush to lay 5, 5.5, 6 with Baltimore here. The injuries are mounting, and they're mounting at an alarming rate. Their offense has been grinding to a halt the last few games, other than a little bit of a decent second half that they had against the Indianapolis Colts a couple weeks ago. This offense struggled against New England last week, albeit the conditions weren't great. It's a worry for me with what we're seeing from Baltimore right now. Their injuries, like I said, on both sides of the football are really starting to become a concern for this team. And we're not just talking about a couple injuries here and there. We're talking about some key pieces to this team on both sides of the football. The tight end, Nick Boyle, Calais Campbell, defensive end, out indefinitely. Khalil Dorsey in the secondary, out. Jimmy Smith, has been out for weeks with the ankle injury. Ronnie Stanley, as I mentioned, the left tackle, injured reserve list, not coming back with that dislocated ankle. Brandon Williams, the defensive tackle, left the last game with a left ankle injury. Not sure he's going to be able to play. I mean, these are impact players, offensively and defensively, that have been lost due to injury for this Baltimore Ravens team right now. And that's not something I love seeing, especially now being asked to lay 5, 5.5, 6 in this game. So it's a really, really tough game here, in my opinion, with the Ravens and the Titans here on Sunday. Very difficult. It's difficult for me to trust this Titans team with the way things are going for them right now. But at the same point in time, you're looking at a Tennessee team that's definitely got their own issues right now as well. So to me, it's a question of the lesser of two evils. Who do you honestly trust more here in this game between these two teams? I'm not sure who that would be, to be honest with you right now. I've got to do some more thinking on this game, the bottom line is right now, because right now it's a situation for me where I've got some major question marks about the direction of both of these teams. I think for Baltimore, it's more an issue of injuries for them, significant key injuries, impact injuries that are definitely going to hurt this team's ability to play good football moving forward. As far as the Titans' issues, I think those issues with the Titans are more, they're just not playing well right now. The defense continues to be gashed. The offense now is sort of regressed a little bit with Tannehill and company. And again, if they go into this game and try to run the football with Derrick Henry, are they going to be able to have a great deal of success doing that? That remains to be seen. Baltimore is only giving up 110 rushing yards per game, 4.5 yards per carry. They've been pretty solid against the run. Will that, and sometimes when you shut down Derrick Henry, Tannehill's better able to be able to make plays and carry the offense maybe than he was earlier in his career. But I still think that this Tennessee offense and Tannehill's production suffers when Derrick Henry can't have that big day running the football. And I have some doubts about him being able to have that big day running the football. So there is definitely, to me, question marks with both of these sides. It's one of those, I don't know if I love trusting Tennessee on the road here, even though they're getting points. And I don't know if I want to lay it with an injury-riddled Baltimore team. So for me right now, I'm staying off this game. We'll see if I change my opinion moving forward. But right now, it's not a game I'm in any hurry to get involved with either the Titans or the Ravens. Next up, Miami, Denver. Miami, 3.5 point road favorites, 45.5 the total in this game. It is a runaway freight train, this Miami team right now. 5 straight wins, 5 straight covers. They have a huge, huge betting support system now. Everybody's loving Miami. Everybody's betting them, and you can tell this opened at pick'em early in the week. Now they're -3 with juice and even -3.5 in some spots. I was fortunate to grab -3 around even money with Miami, and now it's 3 leaning to 3.5. And there are concerns for Miami. Make no mistake about it. I mean, they're now going on the road to elevation, cold weather. I don't remember a time when Tua Tagovailoa has played in the kind of outdoor weather elements that he's played, that he's going to play here in this game against the Denver Broncos. So that's definitely something that you got to have some concern about in the back of your mind. How's he going to fare in these kind of elements? But the flip side of that is Denver truly could be that bad right now. That was a red flag if I've ever seen one. That performance from the Denver Broncos against Las Vegas last Sunday. It was atrocious all around. Defense couldn't stop Las Vegas once they got things rolling. Drew Lock was a decision-making disaster area once again. Turnovers, bad decisions continue to plague him, continue to plague this Denver offense. To me, this is definitely a Denver team that's got issues right now. Their defense hasn't been healthy for a while now. That continues to be a problem as well. They've been down multiple cornerbacks in the secondary due to injury, this Denver Broncos team. So this is a team that is just floundering in all phases right now, and I'm not sure they've got that ability to turn it around. It's getting now to the point where if it gets much higher than 3.5, I might say, you know what, at that point, the ship has sailed. Don't back Miami anymore. But it's still -3, -120 at Bet Online. And there's a couple other places you can find -3 laying a bit of a price with Miami. I still think you've just got to go ahead, ride this Miami team that's won and covered 5 straight. The defense has picked it up. They're getting a little bit more of a pass rush. And Tua Tagovailoa didn't have a good first start against the Rams, even though they won that game. They won it because of defensive and special team scores. But he's picked it up and played well the last couple of weeks. This is just 2 teams going in completely opposite directions. I think as long as it doesn't get much higher than 3.5, I think you can still go ahead and lay the points here with Miami, even with Miami, going to this cold weather environment. Who knows how Tua is going to react to it, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. You're looking at, I think, mid to high 40s with the temperature in Denver on Sunday, the last time I checked that forecast. And I like what I'm seeing from this Dolphins team. Their offense has found other weapons this season. And Denver, to me, defensively has just been god-awful the last few weeks. Injuries have played a big part of that, of course. We have to keep that in mind. But definitely a defense that's struggling to stop anybody right now. That's probably going to continue against Miami. So I definitely like the Dolphins side there, -3 in that game. Jets and Chargers. We've got the Chargers, 9.5 point home favorites, 46 the total in this game on Sunday. The Chargers continue to be an over machine. I have cashed the over with the Chargers and Dolphins last Sunday. That is now 6 straight games for the LA Chargers that have gone over the total. And I'm going to keep riding it. I've been on this Chargers over thing for weeks now, against Denver, against Las Vegas, again last week against Miami. I think it continues. This defense is a shell of what it was last year and 2 years ago. I can't explain it. I know Derwin James is a big loss, and they've had Joey Bosa in and out lately due to injury as well for this team. But for them to just decline so significantly, on the defensive side of the football to the extent that they have, really is surprising to see it, to be honest with you, that they've just been such a completely declining defense compared to where they've been in the past couple of years. And it's everything right now. You can run on the Chargers defense with success. Quarterbacks are getting time to find the receivers down the field. And the secondary coverage has been awful. You're seeing receivers run wide open against this LA Chargers secondary. And that's been something that's occurred on a weekly basis here. Now the question becomes, can you trust the New York Jets, the lowly New York Jets, to be able to make plays against this team? I'll say this about the Jets and with Joe Flacco at quarterback. He showed against New England on Monday Night Football in that game that they almost beat the Patriots. He showed you in that game that if you don't get a pass rush on him and he's got all day to throw the football, he can still make some plays for you. And he did that in that game against the Patriots. That was a great game for Joe Flacco. He was fine, making big plays down the field to Brashad Perriman, to Jamison Crowder. That was a Denzel Mims. That was a really solid through the air aerial attack and pass offense from Joe Flacco in that game. And with the Chargers' inability right now to get pass rush, to have that ability to stop and slow down, opposing teams. And if they're going to give Flacco the kind of time Tua had last week to throw the football, or the kind of time Derek Carr had, to throw the football against this Chargers team 2 weeks ago, why can't Joe Flacco have success? He can still throw it. It's just that he's a statue back there. He's immobile. He can't move very well in the pocket. But if you're not going to get home with your defensive front, we saw it with the New England game on Monday Night Football. Joe Flacco can still hurt you. Now, maybe the Chargers ramp up the pass rush this game. This is the game where all of a sudden this non-existent Chargers pass rush shows up. And if it does, Flacco and the Jets offense is probably in trouble. And I'm probably in trouble betting this game over the total. But I'm going to bank on the Jets being able to give Flacco time, because we haven't seen a great deal of pass rush lately from this Chargers team, which continues to be a major issue and a concern with the Chargers the last few games, where they've been absolutely carved up. They've been giving up 30 points with regularity the last several games, the LA Chargers. On the flip side, the Jets defense is bad still. I mean, they let Cam Newton and the Patriots basically come back to beat them with their offense. And that's a New England offense that has been, let's just say, problematic for a large part of the season. So I don't see them really doing a whole lot defensively to neutralize Justin Herbert and the Chargers. I think the Chargers will score. I'm going to trust that the Jets can at least do their share of contributions to the scoring in this game. And that's why for the seventh straight game, I'm looking at a Chargers over here. Again, 6-0 to the over their last 6 games. Total is down to 46 in this one. It's in LA. It's the beautiful new indoor stadium there. You won't have any weather issues whatsoever. Give me that game over the total 46. As far as the side goes, look, I'm not laying 9.5 with the Chargers. It was another bad loss last week. The season's gotten away from them. And the Jets did cover last week against the Patriots, and they're off a bye. So crazy as it is to say, I'd lean Jets, but I don't have the stones to back the Jets here. And it's funny because I think a lot of the people that I've talked to about this game this week are in the same exact train of thought that I am with this game. We're leaning to the Jets. I think we could only bet the Jets here at plus 9.5, but we don't have the stones to actually take them. And that's kind of where I just think the over is the better look in this game, because I do think the Chargers will have success offensively against a bad Jets defense. But again, if the Chargers defense is bad in the secondary and can't get pressure, which has been a characteristic of this Chargers defense the last couple weeks, even Joe Flacco can pick you apart like he did Monday night against New England a couple weeks ago. So that's why I like over the total here, 46, Jets versus Chargers. All right, Dallas and Minnesota. And then we'll get to Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football to wrap up the show. Minnesota, 7-point home favorites, 48.5 the total. A lot of Dallas money has come in. Minnesota opened 9.5-point home favorites, down to 7 in this game now. I'm going to, at some point, bet Minnesota and go against that move. What do people love in Dallas? I know before their bye week, they finally battled Pittsburgh. But that was with Garrett Gilbert at quarterback, who actually kind of impressed me in that game. I thought he played pretty solid. Now you're going back to Andy Dalton, a quarterback that when he started the 2 games he did for Dallas, they got annihilated by Arizona. They got crushed by Washington. And that, of course, was the game Andy Dalton got injured. They've been non-competitive in the 2 games started by Andy Dalton this year. And Minnesota's hot right now. They're feeling it. They've won 3 in a row. Every but player on that Minnesota team right now, if you read through articles and see player quotes, they think they can get back in this race. I'm not sure how realistic that is. They're still below 500, but they say we're going to give it a shot. We're going to try to get ourselves back into an NFC wildcard contention mix here in the NFC. And it's a team that is not giving up on that opportunity right now. And again, they've started to put it together, play better football. And yeah, you could question, in terms of the strength of schedule of these last few games for the Minnesota Vikings. That's fair. You beat Chicago, struggling mightily right now. You beat Detroit, not a very good team. But you also beat Green Bay, 28-22 on the road. And Dalvin Cook has been the catalyst for this resurgence. He's healthy. He's on the field. He's an impact running back. He's one of, if not the best running backs in the NFL right now, in my opinion. I don't know about the best because there's others out there that are great, but he's one of, no question about that. And we've seen the difference in this Minnesota offense with a healthy Dalvin Cook on the field the last few weeks. And then you look at this Dallas Cowboys defense, giving up 157 yards per game on the ground, an abysmal 5 yards per carry allowance for this Dallas Cowboys run defense. It's very simple with this Minnesota team, in my opinion. If they can run it, they're going to be able to win and put themselves in position to win. This is going to be one of the worst defenses, particularly against the run, that they've faced since they got Dalvin Cook back from injury. He's going to have a field day, I think, in this game against the Dallas Cowboys. Andy Dalton against this Minnesota defense that is finally starting to resemble what we kind of expect to see from a defense coached by Mike Zimmer, who's a defensive guy who has had good defenses in past seasons with this Vikings team. They're finally starting to play that way. The secondary's been better. They've gotten a good pass rush after struggling early in the season. They lost Everson Griffin. Daniil Hunter got injured early in the year. It really, really was a blow to their ability to get pressure. But now we're starting to see those other components on that defensive line get after the quarterback, make plays, and I think you're going to see that happen here against Andy Dalton, who, again, a statue back there under center. So if they get that pass rush going again, remember, they got to Nick Foles a few times last week, similar profile quarterback, Nick Foles, Andy Dalton. They can't move very well. It's going to be, I think, a good matchup on both sides of the ball. Minnesota offense versus Dallas defense, and also Dallas offense versus Minnesota defense. I think Vikings can win both of those head-to-head matchups. And with this number trickling down now to a flat 7 with the Vikings as home favorites, I'm definitely going to be something on this Minnesota side here. I'm going to hold out hope that maybe we get 6.5. If not, I'll pull the trigger at 7. But I'm fading this line move. I'm just because Dallas is off a bye. They get Andy Dalton back. It's a team that's still finding ways to lose games in very painful fashion. And Minnesota, to me, is playing with a purpose right now. And I think they've got the matchup edges on both sides of the ball to win this game by at least a touchdown. So for me, it would be Minnesota -7 in this game. Sunday Night Football. This should be a good one. Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders. Kansas City, 6.5, 7, 7.5, even some 8s showing up here on the Chiefs, 57 the total. There's no way I go against Kansas City here. No way at all. Doesn't matter how high this number goes. It's Andy Reid off a bye. It's Andy Reid in the division. It's Kansas City trying to avenge the only team that has lost to the only team that has beaten them this year. And if you read everything from Mahomes and these Chiefs players, they are chomping at the bit to face this Las Vegas team and get them back. And they're talking about it. They said they are frustrated. They lost that game. It was their worst game performance-wise of the season. Yeah, there's no way in hell I'm going against Kansas City in this spot off the bye. When Andy Reid's long-term track record off the bye is absolutely outstanding as well. No way I'm going against that. And then you start to look at what's going on with Las Vegas. half their defense is on the COVID-19 reserve list right now, and we don't know how many of those starters on defense are going to be available for this game come Sunday night. They've still got to pass a couple more COVID-19 tests and test negative a few more times. So this is one of those games where certainly if you're going to endorse Las Vegas here, which I'm not, but if you're going to want to wait until, the game of the day here or the day of the game and be able to see who's exactly going to be cleared to play for the Las Vegas Raiders, especially on defense. We just don't know that yet. Now, I said just a minute ago, it's Kansas City or pass for me, but with this number now zooming past a full touchdown with Kansas City, I might lay off Kansas City. That's a lot of points to be laying against a Las Vegas team that's played some good football and playing confident. Derek Carr, this is one of the best seasons I've seen out of him the last several seasons. I think this year he's played a lot better. 3 wins in a row against Denver, the Chargers, and Cleveland. This is certainly going to be a much greater challenge against Kansas City. But if you look back on that first meeting, and I remember I watched a condensed game, game in an hour format of the first meeting just yesterday. I wanted to get a sense, was that just Kansas City playing terrible, or was that Las Vegas really playing well against them? Las Vegas shut them down in the second half. It really was. I mean, they got pressure on Mahomes. The secondary was locking up a lot of the key receivers downfield for the Chiefs. How they even did a good job on Kelsey in that game. That was a really good. There was nothing where you could say, "Oh, Kansas City lost that game. Las Vegas didn't necessarily win that game." No, Las Vegas won that game. They played well. They played absolutely outstanding football in that game, and it's not like this game is chopped liver to Las Vegas. I know the rhetoric this week is it's Kansas City looking to avenge that loss to Las Vegas, the only team to beat them this year. Las Vegas is not going to want the game as much. Yes, they do. They still think they can come back to beat Kansas City and win this division. I don't know how realistic that is, but all of a sudden, if they win this game, the Las Vegas Raiders, and sweep the season series against Kansas City, they're 7-3, and Kansas City would drop to 8-2. They would only be 1 game behind Kansas City. And keep in mind, if somehow these two teams finished with identical records at the end of the regular season, Las Vegas would get first place in the AFC West because of beating Kansas City twice. So this game is important to the Raiders as well. Make no mistake about it. But damn, those long-term angles with Reed off the bye, the revenge situation, the divisional record for Kansas City, the fact that all week long they're talking about we want to pay them back for losing earlier in the season. This is not a rush. This is not a situation I'm in a rush to bet Kansas City. I am just floored a little bit that this line is as high as it is. I would have laid 4, 5, 6, 6.5 with Kansas City. But now we're talking this line currently crossing the key threshold of 7, and you're seeing 7.5 and 8 now in certain spots with the Chiefs. And to me, the price is getting a little bit rich at that number. It was clearly a Kansas City or pass game for me, but now it's getting up as high as it is, talking now 7.5 to 8 in a lot of locations and at a lot of books. It's pretty high. The total is going to be interesting as well. We know Las Vegas has been very good offensively. I think Kansas City with the extra time, they're going to have a trick play or a gadget play or two to throw off this Raiders defense, which has played better the last few weeks and certainly stymied the Chiefs in the second half. But I'm not sure that's going to happen again. Just for the potency that these two offenses have and quarterbacks have, I'm reluctant to bet under. I lean over, but it is 57. It's a very high total. But that's the only direction I would go, would be over the total of 57 here between the Chiefs and the Raiders. All right, we wrap it up with the final game for Week 11. Monday Night Football should be a good one. LA Rams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Definitely, I feel good for Steve Levy and Brian Griese and Louis Riddick, the ESPN Monday Night Football crew. They've been stuck with a lot of crap games this year. They're finally going to get a pretty good football game here on Monday night. Tampa Bay, 4-point favorites here in this game against the Rams. We'll see how it ends up going, but fascinating game. Tampa Bay, again, against Carolina, they got their offense back on track after losing 38-3 to the New Orleans Saints. Now, it's important to keep in mind, Carolina's defense is just not good at all compared to New Orleans. So that played a part in why the Bucs offense did so well. But I think what also played a part in it was you finally got all these guys on the practice field for a full week. Remember, they were coming into that New Orleans game on a short week after playing Monday night against the Giants. Then you had a full week going into the Carolina game to get Godwin and Evans and Brown and Gronkowski and all of these weapons that Tom Brady has to try to appease in this, Bucs offense that has a lot of toys that he can play with now in terms of who he can throw the football to. He had to try to get them all in sync, in rhythm, and on the same page. And I think having that full week of practice going into the game against Carolina made a huge difference in terms of getting this offense in rhythm, in sync, and in the right frame of mind. And we saw them absolutely just pick apart Carolina's defense, start to finish, in that 46-23 victory. Great performance, and it makes you think, wow, now the offense is back on track. Look out now. I would say look out now to Tampa Bay's offense in this game, because you go down the schedule, you see who Tampa Bay and Tom Brady have played the last few games, Carolina, and you start to look at results as well. Carolina, no defense to be had whatsoever. New Orleans, a good defense, especially up front. They only get 3 points. The Giants' defense, they struggled for a half in that game, but finally pulled out a 25-23 win in that one. You look at the loss to Chicago, good defensive front. Chicago, with who they have, with Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. That's a good defensive front. And that Chicago defensive front gave Tampa Bay and Tom Brady one of their worst offensive performances of the season to this point. And again, New Orleans a couple weeks ago with a good defensive front gave Tom Brady a ton of problems, didn't give him time to throw the football, sacked him multiple times. The games where they've lit up the scoreboard were Carolina, Las Vegas, Green Bay, Chargers, Denver, Carolina again early in the season. Again, they've all got defensive warts. And the one thing you've got to respect with the Rams is their defensive front, led, of course, by Aaron Donald, the one and only. So, to me, the Rams defense is closer to the Chicago and the New Orleans defenses that rattled Tom Brady, that held him in check, that didn't let that offense take over. And to me, this is going to be a challenge for this Bucs team. I know last week they got it back on track, and certainly getting all of their weapons on the field in a full week of practice helped, as I said. But now you're going to have to show it you can do that against one of the better pass rushing, quarterback pressure teams in the NFL, and that's the LA Rams. So to me, this is where we truly find out if Tampa Bay's offense is going to be just this monster and this handful for opposing teams to deal with moving forward. Because if they go out there on Monday Night Football next week against the Rams and they pile up 31, 35, 38 points and they look brilliant, then we can start to say, you know what? Time to be scared of this Tom Brady-led offense. But if once again, against one of the better defenses and defensive fronts they've seen, like the way they played against the Saints or the way they played against the Bears where they struggled, if they struggle here against the Rams, then I think it's safe to assume Tampa Bay's offense becomes a fairly easy handicap. Against the teams that lack a good pass rush, they can have success. Against the teams that have good front sevens, that can blow up the line of scrimmage, they can get pressure, then they're going to struggle. So this is going to be that referendum, really, for Tom Brady and this Bucs offense. They play well here, look out moving forward. If they struggle here, then that's the continuation of a pattern where against above average or elite pass rushes and defensive front sevens, they struggle. So that's what makes this game fascinating. Which side of the fence do you sit on is essentially the side you like in this game. If you think Tampa Bay's offense has fixed their issues, they can handle this Rams ferocious, aggressive front seven, then you like Tampa Bay in this game. That they got all their weapons back in sync last week, and it'll carry over here. But if you're believing that, hey, against New Orleans and Chicago, the two better defensive fronts that have the Bucs offense has played this year, they struggled in those games. The Rams have every bit the dominant front seven that those teams have, and that they'll struggle again here, then you like the Rams getting 4 points in this game. So that is essentially the biggest matchup that you've got to look at in this game from a handicapping standpoint. So it's tough to me in my mind. But the thing that is very interesting is that the New Orleans game and the Chicago game, where the Bears and the Saints really shut down Brady and the Bucs offense, both of those games stayed under the total. And that's probably going to be the case here. If the Rams are going to compete, cover the number, and win this game, their defense is going to get after it, and the game probably stays under the total. And let's not forget, the Rams are an under machine right now coming into this game. The LA Rams, the last several games, they are on a 6-0 to the under streak. There hasn't been a lot of teams that have been steadily under the total week in and week out in an NFL season that has been as high scoring as this one has been. But the LA Rams are 6-0 to the under in their last 6 games, 26, 40, 40, 34, 45, 39 points in those games. Not a single one of those games, not a one, has come close to 48.5 points scored. So, yeah, this is one over that I don't want. I'm not interested in the over in this game because the Rams are going to be a defensive front that's going to test this Bucs team much more than certainly last week than Carolina. You're not facing the Carolina non-existent defense with no pass rush and pressure on Brady. He had all day to throw the football last week. You're not facing that kind of team here in this game. So it is a great, great litmus test for whether this Bucs offense is just a good offense or whether they're an elite offense. If you're an elite offense and one of the top offenses in the NFL, even against this Rams defensive front, you're supposed to be able to have success moving the ball and be able to put, especially at home. We'll see if the Bucs are able to do that. So right now, it's a really tough game at this point in time to bet. I'm probably not going to get involved in the side or the total right now. I would lean under. I would actually lean Rams slightly here at +4 because we do have evidence where against Chicago, they lost against, earlier this season. So, you've got issues right now for this Tampa Bay team against the good front sevens that have been able to get after it and really wreak havoc along the line of scrimmage, like New Orleans, like Chicago. That is where the Bucs and Tom Brady have had their worst performances this year, and the Rams fit that profile of defense every bit as much as the Saints do, and every bit as much as the defense that the Bears have as well. And of course, unlike the Bears in particular, the Rams do have some offense with Jared Goff and a pretty solid running game. A running game that's got a different running back, it seems, making plays each week for the Rams. Sean McVay doesn't really rely on one running back. He's got like a plethora. He's got a rotation going with Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown and Cam Akers. So it's really difficult to pinpoint, who's going to be that workhorse running back every game for Rams. That's why from a player props perspective, I've pretty much stopped betting Rams rushing props because it could differ every week. One week it could be Darrell Henderson having the big game. One week it could be Malcolm Brown having the big game. One week it could be even Cam Akers out of Florida State having the big game. So just be aware of that. If you're betting Rams rushing props, it's kind of like Russian roulette. You're not exactly sure who's going to get the most touches, the most carries, and who's going to have the biggest impact week to week. But for me, the eye test tells me that the Rams have a shot in this game. So I'm telling you right now, I haven't decided. It's Thursday. That's the Monday nighter. But I'm leaning a little bit to LA here, +4, because we've got two distinct examples of a body of work where against a really good pass rush, we've seen Tom Brady and the Bucs struggle a little bit. And they're going to face a good one here with this LA Rams team. So it's a really, really good game Monday night. I'm looking forward to it with the Rams and the Bucs. And with that, we've come to the end of the NFL Week 11 card, and we've come to an end with this week's edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you missed parts of this show, don't worry. It's up archived for replay viewing all the time right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I enjoy doing this show, as well as the Ian Cameron Sports Report Monday to Friday here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. And don't forget about our live weekend football shows, Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, Connor Mack and I with the College Football Closing Time Show. Sunday at noon Eastern, Connor Mack, Ski Prophet, and I with the NFL Closing Time Show right here on the Pub Sports Radio YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. Good luck this weekend with all of your bets in NFL Week 11 action. Hope you cash some tickets. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back with you next Thursday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, and we'll do it all over again with another live edition of Pub Sports Radio's Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy Week 11, and good luck.